5 horrible and historical true tales from North America. Have you ever heard a story that was so bewildering you just couldn't believe it? Maybe one of your friends told you something, and you didn't believe her until much later on. Well, North America is a big place with a lot of history. And in that time, there have been all sorts of amazing stories. What kind of stories do you prefer? There are a lot to choose from. Unfortunately, not all of them are true. But some of the best horror stories are the ones that really happened. Today, we're going to talk about 5 of the most horrible, but completely true, stories from around North America. Some of these stories have inspired crime documentaries, while others have remained somewhat mysterious. Let's start. Be sure to like the video, subscribe for more content, and watch until the end for a bonus surprise. Number 1. The Mad Trapper. Albert Johnson, otherwise known as the Mad Trapper of Rat River, was a man of mystery who lived in northern Canada in 1931. Nobody knew where he was from or how he ended up there. When he arrived, he built a small cabin on the bank of Rat River. Johnson was a trapper, but provided no trapping license. Many Americans were fleeing to Canada to make a decent living after the Great Depression, and Johnson was likely one of them. Or at least, that's what the inhabitants thought. Someone complained that Johnson was tampering with his traps, tripping them, hanging them from trees, and so on. The police went to track him down, but Johnson didn't say a word. When they got a warrant and broke down his door, Johnson shot one of them. They escaped and returned with a posse. Thus began one of the greatest manhunts of the time. 9 men, 42 dogs, and 20 pounds of dynamite made the 60-mile trek from town to Johnson's cabin, where they blasted it to bits. Johnson somehow was ready for this and opened fire from a dugout underneath the cabin. After a standoff, the posse retreated to town for more assistance. News got out, and the posse returned, surrounding him. Johnson killed Constable Edgar Millen and escaped. Johnson escaped through the Richardson Mountains on foot, climbing a 7,000-foot peak, and disappeared. They hired an aviator to scout from the air, who determined Johnson was hiding his tracks by following in caribou tracks in the river, allowing him to go faster and go without snowshoes. They eventually tracked him down, where Johnson tried to escape once again. But since he didn't have snowshoes, the police caught up quickly. Johnson mortally wounded another officer, but was shot, ending his life. After his death, officials realized he had traveled over 85 miles in snow and mountains with no assistance in just over a month. When he died, he had over $2,000 of currency on him, some other trappings, and a few dead animals. During the entire time he was chased, Johnson never said a single word. All they ever heard was his malicious laughter after shooting and killing Constable Millen. To this day, no one knows who he really was, why he moved to the Arctic, or even if he had tampered with other traps in the first place. His true identity was never discovered. Who do you think Albert Johnson really was? Why did he move to Canada? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Number 2. Joe Baldwin and the Maco Light. Joe Baldwin was a train brakeman operating in Maco, North Carolina in the 1800s. He was in his train's caboose when it somehow, suddenly, unexpectedly became uncoupled from the rest of the train. Baldwin knew that another train was coming. He could see the light from it in the distance. He held up his lantern, hoping the train would stop. He waved it around, desperate to get the attention of the conductor. It didn't work. The train didn't stop. Joe Baldwin was killed, his head cut off in the crash. Joe's body was later found, but his head remained missing. After a few nights, a conductor saw a strange light on the tracks, almost like a lantern waving frantically. This caused some confusion. What was this mysterious light? Why was it moving so strangely? Regardless, the light only appeared at night and only around Maco. It became known as the Maco Light, and nearly everyone on those tracks at the time claimed to have seen it on one night or another. Eventually, the signalman began using 2 lights. All signals with only one light were to be ignored so as not to be confused with the Maco Light. While reports about the details of the light vary, it invariably appears on the tracks, and when they were torn out in the 1970s, the light never appeared again. Many claim that this light was from Joe Baldwin's lantern, swinging it around, searching for his head. Later, people claim that Joe Baldwin didn't exist and was likely someone called Charles Baldwin, who was involved in a similar accident 10 years prior to Joe's death. Regardless of origin, the Maco Light was seen by many and lacks a full explanation to this day. What do you think caused it? Was it just some natural phenomenon, a ghost, or something even more sinister? The mystery may never be solved. Number 3. Icebox Murders. Charles Rogers lived with his elderly parents, Fred and Edwina Rogers. Rogers was a recluse, communicating with his family with notes under the door, leaving home to study science before dawn and not returning until after dark. Rogers was a genius, getting a degree in nuclear physics and becoming a successful seismologist for Shell for 9 years, until he suddenly quit without reason in 1957 to join the Civil Air Patrol. On June 23, 1965, Edwina's nephew reported to the police that Edwina hadn't answered any of his calls for days. Police forced their way into the home and found nothing unusual, except a few cuts of meat stacked up on the shelves of the refrigerator. That, and the 2 human heads that were also in the fridge. Yep, the cuts of meat were the bodies of Rogers' parents. They were likely killed 3 days earlier, on Father's Day. There wasn't much blood in the house, and Rogers was the only suspect. He was never found and was declared dead in absentia in 1975. Allegedly, Rogers' parents abused him. Fred Rogers was a bookie, and Edwina Rogers stole from him. Charles likely fled to Mexico after committing the murders and was hidden by some of the friends and high places he had met during his time at Shell and in the Civil Air Patrol. Who knows what he got up to after his escape? What sinister things do you think he was up to? Or do you think he was simply living a peaceful life on his own? Number 4. The Bell Witch. The story of the Bell Witch began in the book An Authenticated History of the Bell Witch by Martin Ingram. In the book, Ingram told the story of a ghost named Kate who haunted the Bell family in Tennessee around 1817. John Bell witnessed an apparition of a dog-like creature. His son Drew saw an enormous bird. His daughter Betsy saw a girl in a green dress. The family heard stories of gnawing and chains rattling. Sheets were pulled from the bed. Some entity was pulling the children's hair and scratching them. The Bells looked for a friend to help, James Johnson. He told the Bells it was a spirit haunting them. Word of the Bell Witch spread far and wide, and some traveled quite a ways to see this spirit. The ghost began to speak, claiming it was happy once, but had been disturbed. It gossiped, repeated sermons, made arguments, and held full conversations. It would mimic dead people and people it would have never met. Even Andrew Jackson was interested in the story of the Bell Witch. While the Bell Witch was likely all folklore, the Bell family was definitely real, and the stories of the witch brought people to come see from all over the world. It's impossible to deny the stories and accounts of the witch's history, but there's also certainly some exaggeration here. Legend and myth can always be swapped out for fact and reality when the sources are unreliable, as they were in the case of the Bell Witch. But what do you think? Do you think the Bell Witch was real, or was she just an attraction made to drum up interest in a small town in Tennessee? Number 5. The Starving Time. The Starving Time was a period of starvation in Jamestown, Virginia in 1609 to 1610. When the winter began, there were about 500 people living in the historic Jamestown. But when spring rolled around, only 60 remained. The rest were dead, and most had starved to death. When settlers arrived, they never planned to grow all their own food, depending on trade with nearby Native American tribes to secure most of their food supply. When an English fleet arrived late into the winter, it was without food, a huge oversight. Not only that, but the water was only good for about half the year. It became undrinkable during the winter. To make things even worse, a series of unfortunate events with some of the local tribes developed into conflicts, which ended trade between them, which ended a majority of the food supply. The conflict also forced the settlers into a smaller area with less room for agriculture, further crippling their food sources. Houses of the dead were chopped up and used as firewood. The survivors ate anything that moved: cats, rats, horses, dogs, and in at least one case, other settlers. In fact, it's scientifically likely that a good chunk of the survivors turned to cannibalism to get through the winter. If you think about it, some of the earliest Americans had to do something so terrible just to survive. It's not entirely impossible that one of the Jamestown survivors is one of your ancestors. Once spring rolled around, the settlers realized their main crop, tobacco, could be traded for profit and food, and back to England for even more supplies. If not for this breakthrough, the next winter would likely have been even bleaker, and America as we know it may not have survived. Who knew tobacco could save lives? Thanks for watching the video so far. We've got one more bonus story for you, as a little parting gift for you. Did you like any of these stories? Leave a like on the video to show your support, and subscribe for more. We've got more spooky videos coming soon. Let's hear one more horrible story. Bonus: Black Dahlia. Elizabeth Short was a young woman living in Los Angeles in 1947, returning from visiting her boyfriend, Robert Manley. 6 days later, her body was found in 2 pieces in a vacant lot. Her face had been slashed from her mouth to her ears and had several cuts. The body was posed with her hands over her head, elbows bent, and legs spread. A cement sack containing watery blood was found nearby. The autopsy showed that she was killed with a blow to the face and was cut in half after she had died. The media nicknamed her the Black Dahlia, and investigations ramped up, with over 750 investigators working on this case. A suspect was never found, but there were plenty of confessions, over 500, many of which by people who were not even born at the time of her death. To this day, it's one of the most infamous unsolved cases in all of North America, and there have been several true crime documentaries covering it. Thanks for watching our video. What was your favorite horrible story? Leave a comment down below. Looking for more? Check out this playlist. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss more videos by us. We've got 2 more spooky videos coming up soon. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.